This presentation is based on my book, Hidden in Plain Sight, Realizing the Full Potential of Middle Leaders, and really covers chapter 1. What I'm adding to today's content is strategies for behavioral interviewing. Our learning objectives today, 5 learning objectives. First, I want to introduce the 3 dimensions from my book and how they impact selecting the right middle leaders. I want you to understand how the middle leader's role evolves from the time that we actually select them through to them achieving the expectations we set. As those roles evolve, so does the support and the development that they need. So we may start out with a description that, in many ways helps us understand who we want, but as that person develops, so does that job description. So please be mindful of that. Lastly, I want us to agree really on what leaders and the difference between leaders and supervisors. Are we looking for a team leader or a work group supervisor? You're going to learn more about that in this presentation. And then as we move from the content about middle leaders, I'm going to share some strategies with you about behavioral competency interviewing. Based on that, these slides will be available to share, and I'll give you more details about that at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. Why are middle leaders important? I believe that's why many of you are tuning in and will be watching this webinar. I like to start with this Dilts quote, Robert Dilts, back in the 90s. He really framed it best because he really talked about how values drive the beliefs and the beliefs drive the behaviors. All of these get wrapped up into a narrative, a story, or an identity that really speaks to who we are. And when everybody's telling that same story, it can be incredibly powerful in terms of aligning the efforts that they make towards working towards a common purpose. So I would have to say the most important thing that a middle leader brings to a team is really aligning the values, the beliefs, and the behaviors of the team so that they're working in concert towards achieving the same purpose. Now, as they do this, there's going to be inevitable conflict. And I think many senior leaders, when they actually ask me about how to select and develop middle leaders, they're really focused on how do we get them to get this very diverse group of people to play together nicely, to collaborate. Collaborate's the key word, obviously. When they have so many different ideas, or they might be at so many different paths in their own journey or understanding of what needs to get done. So ultimately, a middle leader has to understand and respect that, yes, everybody is there with the passion to help and improve student learning, but how they conceptualize to do it is going to be different, and their experiences are really lead them down those different paths. So a middle leader, in terms of creating that narrative and that story, has to find a way to tell a story that gets everybody on the same path, but takes advantage of all the experience that they bring individually. And when they can do that, and every member of that team is working together towards improving student learning, they not only see that the success of their students is important, but the success of their colleagues' students is important, and that they realize that they are a better teacher when supported by the other teachers, in effect, collective efficacy, then that ultimately is how we improve student learning. That all comes through a middle leader. As we kind of drive through that higher level idea of what we expect from our middle leaders, and we distill it down into these nuts and bolts about ensuring and aligning common purpose and dealing with difficult conversations and conflict within a team. I try to capture all this in the book. Now, I've been doing book studies with various schools, and here are some of the quotes that have funneled up from those book studies that people find really interesting in chapter 1. Number 1, that identifying the middle leader is not just about it's my turn to lead, or I have that experience. I might have come from another school and I was a grade level leader or coordinator, so therefore I'm going to be a good grade level leader or coordinator in this school. That's not always the case. We can't just rely on that. A common bias as well is about professionalism. This word professionalism, even though it might resonate with us as something that's very important in terms of how we conduct ourselves, many people define it differently. And in how they define it is often where a lot of conflict lies. So understanding how people define such a word as professionalism in many ways can also impact how we evaluate the success of our middle leaders. Lastly, as we kind of move through these quotes, I really want you to focus on the fact that Teachers are individuals. They're really working to do the best for their students. They're very efficacious. As they do this, they're going to confront many different challenges. The challenges they confront this year are going to be different next year, and we're probably different from the year before. So therefore, they're constantly adapting. Teachers are working in a constantly adapting environment, and so therefore they need leaders to help usher them through this change. It may not be the fact that the middle leader is a subject expert or the best in that subject in such a way that can help these teachers do better lesson planning. It may be that your middle leader is just really good interpersonal skills that can help instill confidence in teachers as they work through change. When we think about these three dimensions that middle leaders work through, it's important to note that these three dimensions are incredibly important for not just trying to understand the middle leader we need for a particular team, but for the fact that the middle leader is going to have different needs and expectations across other teams. What I mean by this is that no team is the same. No team is going to have the same challenges. We might have the same expectations for those teams, but the challenges for each team will be unique. It's unique based on how many people are on that team, how many people are new to that team, how many people are new to the city or the school that you're working in. It's fair to say that if you have a new member of staff to a school, they're in the honeymoon phase. They want to contribute as much as they can, but they're also trying to understand the school in a greater context, the community, the city, the students' needs. So it can be very hard to them to attend to the needs of the team. If the team feels they're not contributing effectively enough or enough in terms of contributing to the knowledge base of that team, certain members of the team could tune out the new member. Therefore, the new member not getting support that they need. So we have to be mindful that in the first 3 months, what we're really focusing on here within our team structure is the level of capacity that our team has for change and for the work that we're going to do, and understanding that every member in that team is different. So now let's take a look at those three dimensions for choosing the middle leader. Well, let's look at the dimension of team. I already talked relatively to this point about how teams are different and how the member relationships within those teams will largely affect how well they're able to collaborate and work together. When we take a look at this as well, how invested are these teachers, these team members, into the success of other teachers' students? How much are they willing to go in and analyze that other data or have data of their students analyzed by peers? So looking at where this team is in terms of its member subscription to the team for their experience with the school, their experience with the curriculum, their trust in working with each other, in itself provides many different variables we need to take into account for finding the right team leader. Let's look at the outcome or what's expected. Now, here within this slide, these are really questions I'm posing to senior leaders. How clear are you in terms of what you expect from the middle leader? How explicit can you make that outcome? And are you able to provide even additional support in the way of saying what it looks like to achieve it? What are the steps that a middle leader will have to take to get there? And those steps need to be relative to the team they're going to be leading, because again, no team is the same. So some teams may be able to comply with those steps very easily, whereas other teams that are still forming may have a really difficult time getting started. This also brings us to the topic of capacity. What is the capacity this team has for change? Capacity, when we talk about capacity, we're really talking about competencies. We're talking about the skills that they have to really bring to bear on the change that is expected of them, the experience that they have, and the types of tools that they're familiar with using. Their capacity is something that a middle leader needs to develop. So if this is a highly experienced team that's used to experimenting with many different tools, then this is a team that we could largely expect to work more independently. If it's a team that's newly formed and perhaps there is less experience on the team, then we might need to spend more time with that team just developing their capacity to use tools and strategies, which means that they're going to lag behind the more experienced teams or the teams that have demonstrated being able to work more effectively together. Therefore, that team's going to need a little bit different of a middle leader that's more capable of teaching these skills and strategies. Whereas the middle leader who's leading a team that's demonstrated the ability to use these tools and strategies is going to be more of a facilitator and working in and amongst the teams, ensuring interdependency. Now, a very important point before we even continue to look at how you select your middle leaders is I want to reflect on Project Aristotle. If you Google search Project Aristotle, you're going to see that it was a project done by Google to try to understand what is an effective team, and more importantly, how do you lead an effective team or be an effective team leader? To answer this question, Google really came down and brought it down to two very important points. Being, how do we define team? And as we define team, how do we define team leader in respect to those expectations? There's two types of teams, or two forms of unit of organization. One is a working group, and the other is a team. A working group is characterized by the least amount of interdependence. They're based on an organizational managerial hierarchy. So therefore, we're really just checking in and making sure people are doing the work. It's okay in this case to really call the team leader a supervisor, and the supervisor's role is really to ensure that each individual team member is able to do the job that they're expected to do. They can use their experience to help these team members, show them how to work within the school's processes, how they do lesson planning, assessment, reporting, how we facilitate parent-teacher evenings. These are the types of things a supervisor could help with. In many ways, you could even see a supervisor as a mentor. But now when we talk about teams, this is a much different expectation. The expectation on a team is that everyone is working together to pursue one common purpose or objective. To achieve that common purpose or objective, they really need to be bought into that purpose. It means our values and beliefs have to be aligned. And additionally, they have to have clarity in terms of their role and the expectation for the responsibilities. To do this, means that they're going to have to work a lot harder beyond lesson planning for their own classes. They're going to have to get more into the practice with others, and they're going to have to reflect more on their own practice, and there's going to be changes that they have to make. So one of the things that I'd like to introduce to you at this stage, as far as tools that I use with middle leaders, is at this point I like to really get an understanding of where we're going, what their expectations are. So I'm going to try this with you based on who might be online right now. Please go to www.mentee.com, and you're going to type in this six-digit code 299024. Within this 6-digit code, you're going to find a screen that pops up on mentee.com, and it's going to ask, based on Google's definition of a team, what do you feel is a realistic expectation for your middle leaders? Do you want them to supervise a working group or lead a team? So what I'm really asking people at this stage in the workshops that I lead and the presentations that I have around this topic is, let's reflect on Google's definitions of these organizations, of these units of organization. A working group has a supervisor, checks in individually with people to make sure they're doing their job. Whereas a leader has a team and is working to align their values and beliefs around a common purpose that they're going to work interdependently to achieve. They can't achieve it alone. So the question is, really at this point, is it realistic to expect middle leaders to achieve this? In many cases, what we see now, we have people feeding in, and yes, they want to lead a team. They want their middle leaders to lead a team. So let's now start thinking about how this is going to happen. I'm just going to move on forward for those that are still reflecting on it or can't get into mentee.com because you don't want to manage multiple screens. I completely understand it. But I do feel this is a very important tool you can do with your prospective middle leaders and ask them if they'd like to be a supervisor or a leader, because then this is a great opportunity for you to introduce what's going to be next. And those are those expectations. One thing that we need to think about as well as we develop this job description for our middle leader is how the teams develop. So we're bought into the fact that we want our middle leaders to lead, not supervise. So let's be realistic in terms of our expectations for them. To lead a team, one of the models that I like to reflect on for team building is Tuckman's stages. Now, Tuckman presented a model: forming, storming, norming, and performing. I think many of us are familiar with this. One thing that many people aren't familiar with is the last word, adjourning. It doesn't rhyme so well, so maybe that's why we don't remember it. It was added much later in the model as well. But in this way, I like to say team leaders and teams actually evolve in the same way. The job description for a team leader at the beginning stages of a team, and let's assume the school year starts in August. So I'm going to call forming August and September. During this stage, our team leader's job is really to team build, to develop trust, to clarify the role and the responsibilities of the team members, and to identify the purpose that they're going to work towards. By the end of the forming stage, and I would say largely 2 months into the school year, we would want our team leaders to identify a common purpose that everybody is bought into and wants to pursue through the school year. Now, by the end of September, say, we have that statement of purpose. We have this mission statement for the team. At this stage, what Tuckman would say is many teams enter the storming stage. Well, how are we going to do it? And this comes back to the quote I showed you earlier about Achenstein. And what she was talking about was that at this time, we know where we want to go, but how do we get there? Everybody has different ideas. We're all passionate about getting there, but trying to reconcile our experiences and our ideas with others can be very tiresome and in many ways can lead to conflict. So we need our middle leader at this point to have their job description change to actually helping teams understand how to resolve conflict. They go from being a team builder to a conflict resolver. They try to use conflict for the benefit of the team in terms of incubating new ideas. When they successfully do that, they move to the norming stage. The norming stage, we would hope would happen by late November, December, possibly January, depending on how busy your teams are. As your teams move into these stages, again, the team leader's role changes. Now they're becoming more of a facilitator in that norming stage. Hopefully by the time we get to about February, March, our team is performing. They're really realizing the goal that they've set for how they're going to work together or how they're going to improve student learning in the classroom. And if we were to look at Tuckman's through the lens of an August to June window, that's largely what it looks like. These are teams working towards a common purpose, and based on that purpose, they go through these stages. Now, the real question is how can you iterate their successes in such a way that we're scaffolding them to achieve something much greater over the period of 2 or 3 years? Tuckman's is really about a goal, not about a team over the long duration. It's about a goal. They're trying to achieve a particular purpose. Is this goal a 1-year goal, a 2-year goal, or a 3-year goal? Because now as senior leaders, you need to really be thinking, how long is this middle leader going to be in place for this team? How long can we keep this team together? If people in that team leave, how can we assure coherence in terms of what they're working towards? Well, a lot of that's based on who we invite into the team later on. So as we work through this, I want you to understand how the middle leader's job is changing, and it's going to change from year to year. Now, this doesn't mean that we need to change the middle leader year to year, but we also need to be upskilling them for these new challenges that they're going to be facing. Again, here in menteecom, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but I want to expose you to a tool that I use when I'm in my workshops or presentations, because I want to get a good idea where people are in terms of being able to access this information and apply it. I want them to see that the development of a team and the development of the leader is scaffolded in such a way that we start with goals. A working group obviously has very individual goals, whereas a team has very collaborative goals. So when we look at what degree of interdependency do we want your teams to have, I think a lot of us are going to be on that team side of it. Goals are collaborative, unit planning, they're co-planning, student work, they're analyzing it. They're not just reviewing, evidence of learning. They're actually analyzing it to see how they can improve it. Peer observation. In a work group, you're not really going into other people's classrooms, but in a team, you are, and you're taking ideas away. You're not going into those classrooms necessarily to give feedback or to criticize. You're going in there to seed ideas, see how they develop, take them away, replant them in other classrooms. Then we move into giving and receiving feedback. So notice how I've scaffolded these team activities. It could be just possible in the first year of a team working together that we just work around a collaborative goal. Don't push them into unit planning, student work, observation, receiving feedback, maybe showing that they can modify practice. Give them time to develop. Give them time to at least work through collaborative goal setting, move into collaborative planning, then begin to look at student work. Just looking at student work alone could take an incredibly long time. So in that particular case, give it time. When we start looking at moving from this supervisor to the leader, we also have to understand that the middle leader that we're hiring and the competencies that we're looking for are no longer technical and problem solving. What we're really looking for is interpersonal and management skills. Now, this is a whole nother level of leadership that many of us aren't going to be comfortable with, only for the fact that it's a form of development that is not a hard skill. A lot of these interpersonal skills are soft skills. So when we go looking for our middle leaders, really we have to ask the question, are they bringing the appropriate amount of soft skills into the role that will help them build trust and get a team working interdependently? Or is this something that we need to develop because they have an earnest desire to develop in this way? Management skills as well. There's a lot of administration to leading a team, to really following up with team members in terms of the goals that they've set, keeping them on track with those goals through evaluative measures. And again, it's not evaluation to be punitive. It's evaluation to help people develop. So that's a management skill, because you need processes so that we can be mindful of the development of our team members. Do we have the tools and resources to develop those management skills? A lot of schools I go into, they're still feeling around evaluation. And to be fair, every time a new senior leader comes to a school, they're often bringing new ideas about evaluation. So it's constantly changing. It's a moving target. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick check-in as well, just kind of see if there's been any questions. Going to look around. No questions as of yet. All right. So moving us forward, another thing that we can be thinking about, and feel free to add in the attributes of a great leader. Again, menteecom, 6-digit code. This is a great exercise that we can do with prospective candidates for middle leaders or our current middle leaders, reflecting on the culture that we work in. When you're using this, I highly recommend you just type in one word, not 2 or 3 words. Try to use single word attributes, because ultimately what we'll develop here within menteecom is a word map. And within that sort of word map, we're going to get a really good idea about the attributes that stand out strongest. So here, great example, interpersonal. As this word map develops, obviously the words that are used more repetitively, those words grow larger. So as you start to look at the requirements for a middle leader in your school, this is another great place to get data for understanding who you need to hire, because we need an interpersonal leader. We need a professional. So we're going to define what professional is. And as those candidates come in, we're going to really build what's next, a success profile around these attributes. It's important when we think about a success profile and what I'm introducing now, it's really taking into account who's our most successful middle leader, our head of faculty, coordinator, grade level leader, deputy principal. Who's the most successful one? What types of attributes do they have? What makes them successful? How can we create a profile around this person or even people? And as we develop that profile, we're really looking at 4 sections of a profile. I'm going to show you an example here in a minute. But these sections are about the job challenges and experience they need. I would argue that across all middle leader positions, that when we go from the technical or problem-solving elements of it, which tend to be very grounded in their subject area, and we move more towards interpersonal and management, the job challenges and experience actually apply across all middle leader positions, not just those individual siloed ones that tend to be more subject-specific or even student-specific based on age. So as we develop this success profile, what I really encourage you to do is focus on the interpersonal and management skills. Next, what's the knowledge that a middle leader needs to thrive in your school? The leadership behaviors that are going to be, people are going to best respond to, and the personal style that they bring. A personal style is often the culture of your school, the values inherent in it. It's, if it's that caring, supportive sort of culture that we want to create, collaborative culture, we need to make those personal styles more explicit. We're looking for someone that's helpful. So when we go into and doing our behavioral competency interview, which I'm going to show you again in a little bit, you're going to really focus on questions about, tell us about a time that you helped somebody in need on your team. And you can even be more specific with that question. But a lot of these sort of attributes within each one of the sections already exist within your school culture. How do you make it explicit? Well, let's take a look at what it looks like in this particular case for a head of faculty. This, by the way, also can be a job description. So, the success profile for a head of faculty is responsible and accountable for creating a collaborative and caring team environment, leading to the development of creative, enthusiastic, confident teachers who will take action in an ever-changing environment. So we're really setting this expectation very clear. If you're going to be a head of faculty, not only do you need to get your team to collaborate, but you need to demonstrate caring for all your team members. You need to bring enthusiasm to the job because guess what? It's constantly changing. And what are people going to complain about? Not enough time, not being clear on what's expected of them. It's going to be your job to help them use that time more effectively and efficiently, as well as keep them motivated throughout this process. Now, just take a look at the various sections here and some of the information that I've teased out. I think it's really important for this level success profile, you keep it simple, 3 attributes per section. Here I've kind of laid out a few areas such as for knowledge and personal style that I think are important. So I'm going to let this sit with you and resonate with you. This success profile, again, is something that I would recommend across all heads of faculty, grade level leaders, coordinators. You might differentiate it a little bit, obviously, as well as for deputy principals. But for the most part, this is a good place to start for you. Once you have this in place, what you're going to be doing next is you're going to be interviewing. So basically, hey, this is the job description. We're going to welcome people to apply for the roles or reapply for a role they already have. And coming in now to the interview, we're not just going to lead them with some open questions or maybe some clarifying questions about what they're doing with their team and what they want to do with the team next year. But let's get into real detail about how this person has performed in the past. One of the things that's really interesting is that past performance often does contribute to understanding how a person is going to perform in the future. So let's get this through their lens, through their own ideas about the experiences they've had and those experiences they're going to use to lead their team. In this particular case, I'm going to focus on facilitating change. I'm going to come back to the success profile, and I want you to notice that facilitating change is under section 3. How I have it defined here and how I have it defined in the competency-based behavioral interview guide is the same. So it's a 1-to-1 here. So I'm basically taking from the job description, and now I'm going to be interviewing based on these attributes. The question I'm using is describe a time when you had to implement curricular changes when you had a limited knowledge of the curriculum and were provided with little information or guidance. Now, this is the type of question that's going to resonate with a lot of teachers because often that's one of their largest criticisms about senior leaders. Is that they haven't been given enough guidance. So now I'm going to ask you to lead a team in a similar instance. I want you to reflect on the experiences you had. How did you and your team work through that? Can you replicate that success in a new team? So those latter questions are probing questions. Within my competency guide, I also add them there. How did you support teachers to implement these changes? Looking back at this situation, what was the key to success? Success is critical because we want them to build on their success. We want them to identify how that's a strength coming into their new role. As I've worked through this process, taking you from the very beginning on why it's important to have middle leaders, really focusing on getting them to align and unite a team around a common purpose, understanding that to do that, especially with a team of very diverse individuals that have their own unique experiences and ways of doing things, that this middle leader has to overcome that. And if they do overcome that and get that team working interdependently together, that collective efficacy, that team working together and demonstrating that, yes, you make me a better teacher, so therefore my students get the benefit of that, is really the role.